Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is ChukwunonsoCaptures, aka Mazi. Chakum, aka the Photo Cosmetic Surgeon, and we are back in Photo Lab, and this is another YouTube video tutorial. Okay, so I'm gonna teach you guys how to use any digital camera. If you guys can understand this, then you can basically understand anything in digital photography, all right? So besides lighting, of course, the major difference between a picture that looks like this and a picture that looks like this is you changing the way that your camera's eye behaves. So just like the eye on your face, your camera's eye can bug out a little bit. It could be a little bit sensitive sometimes, and it could wink. All right, so since this is intended to be a beginner's tutorial, I'm just gonna keep it simple, right? And then we're gonna build on our knowledge as you continue to support this channel and you continue to watch more YouTube videos. So basically, when I refer to as your eye bugging out, or the opposite of that, squinting, that's what we refer to in digital photography as aperture, okay? So aperture is basically how wide open the hole in your camera's lens is and how much light is allowed to go into it, all right? That's a simple way to think about it. And the second one that I mentioned, the sensitivity of your eye, that's what we call ISO. All right, the acronym ISO. So the ISO is basically how sensitive your camera's, basically its sensor is to the light that it's receiving, okay? So that's ISO. And then the last one is shutter speed, okay? So shutter speed is basically how fast, the one with the winking, is basically how fast your camera's eye is winking, okay? So basically, that could affect how bright the picture is, because if it winks really fast, right, then it doesn't allow the camera enough light to get into it to make the picture brighter. And so basically the picture is darker, right? If it winks really slow, then more light enters the hole, the aperture. I don't want to confuse you, but basically the hole, and hits the sensor. I don't want to use two basically concepts at once, but and say aperture. So we'll just call it hole when I'm discussing shutter speed. So more light goes into the hole, and then the picture gets brighter, right? So that's basically how you can understand the three basic things that affect the way a picture looks: aperture, shutter speed, ISO, okay? All right, so follow me to my camera screen, right? I'm gonna discuss basically how all those things affect the way a picture looks. I'm gonna throw up some examples on the screen, and I'm gonna show you how to change those settings on the camera so you can get a better idea of what I'm talking about. All right, let's go. Come on. All right, so here's my Nikon screen. It basically displays everything that I was talking about before. So on the far left over here, we have shutter speed, right? In the middle, we have aperture. Oops. And all the way on the right, we have ISO, okay? So I'm gonna start all the way on the left. This is shutter speed, right? So most cameras have an interface like this. So I'm gonna basically show you what shutter speed does. Now shutter speed, I'm going to right now it's set to 1/100, right? And as I rotate this dial, it's going to basically display faster and faster shutter speed. See, now it's 1/200, okay? So essentially, the faster the shutter speed is, the darker the picture is. And here we have the exposure meter. And you might have noticed that as I was rolling that dial, the exposure meter went to the left, basically meaning that the picture is darker. So I'm gonna take it back to 100, right? And you're gonna see that the exposure meter is gonna go to the right. It's gonna show that the picture is getting a little bit lighter. You see that? So the slower the shutter speed is, I'm gonna make it see, this is 1/80. The slower the shutter speed is, the brighter the picture is, right? See, and since it's taking, basically the camera is taking more time to allow light inside it, so the picture gets brighter and brighter. You see the exposure meter? So the exposure meter, zero's in the middle, and then as it goes to the left, they're negative numbers, and then as it goes to the right, they're positive numbers. So the brighter the picture is, the more, the further to the right it's going. You see what I'm saying? So a typical standard shutter speed for most pictures is, you know, around like 1/200 or something like that, to avoid motion blur, right? It's gonna make the picture darker, but there are other things that you can do to kind of lighten the picture up to accommodate for that darkness. All right, so I'm going to throw a picture up here on the screen to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. So this picture was taken at a shutter speed of 1/4 of a second, so 1/4 of a second. And as you can see, the cars are in motion, right? The cars are in motion and they're blurry. They're blurry because it's only taken at 1/4 of a second. So that basically means that the camera's eye was blinking really slowly. And with the camera's eye blinking really slowly, there's motion blur. The camera isn't able to capture kind of like a still image, and so it shows, since the shutter is open for a little bit longer, and 1/4 of a second, I know it might seem kind of fast in our perspective, but to a camera, 1/4 is really slow. So it captures all the movement of the cars, because the shutter is open for long enough for the car to move from one part of the picture all the way to another one, the other part of the picture, and the camera captures all that movement, and the movement is blurred, right? So that kind of illustrates really quickly how shutter speed affects a picture, right? Okay, so now back to the camera. So like I said, shutter speed can make a picture brighter. It could also make a picture darker and things like that. It could also do that in addition to motion blur. But brightness and darkness are settings that can be changed through a variety of other things in the camera, right? But the one unique thing that shutter speed does is that it can affect the presence or the absence of any type of motion blur. So that's why I used the last picture that I showed you guys as an example to demonstrate what shutter speed does. Okay, so next here we have aperture, right? And the aperture setting, I call that the squint number. As you can imagine, the white portion shows, in the center here, shows basically how, that's basically the camera's eye opening, right? Now, as I roll this dial here, it gets closed more and more. You see that F number? It's called an f-stop. So the bigger the number gets, the more the camera's eye is shrinking. See, I'm gonna open it and close it. See, I'm opening it now, and I'm closing it. See, I like to call this the squint number, and that is a good way to think about it, because then you'll understand why the number is kind of set up that way. So the more it seems counterintuitive, because you see how the more open it is a smaller number, but then the more that I close it, it's a bigger number. So it seems opposite, right? But I call it the squint number. So I like to think of it like this. The more the camera is squinting, it's squinting more, big squint number means that the camera's eye is closed. You get that? So that's the way to think of it to understand it. You know what I'm saying? So if I'm squinting a big number, then I'm squinting a lot, then my camera's eye is closed. But if I'm squinting a little bit, not really squinting a lot, then my eye is open, right? So like I said, this affects the darkness or the brightness of a picture, right? The f-stop number. You probably noticed that the exposure meter wasn't moving around a lot. That's because I have it aimed at a black backdrop, a black background right now. But if I had these two reflectors to the left and right side of me. So if I just aim my camera towards the reflector so it can catch a little bit more light, you'll see, let's see if I can get it. Yeah, you'll see the exposure meter. Make sure you can still see that. You'll see the exposure meter change a little bit, see? That way it'll, I'm basically telling my camera to look at something a little bit more reflective. There's these silver reflectors. You might have seen it in the previous shot with just me. And as I squint the camera more, see, this is f2. As I squint the camera more, we're going more towards negative numbers, you know what I'm saying? So the picture's getting darker, and as I open the camera's eye up more, we're getting more towards positive numbers. The picture looks brighter and brighter, right? So if we were in a brighter room, it would go all the way to positive, but you get the idea. So that's f-stop, that's aperture, right? That's how you can think of aperture. I call it the squint number. Now I'm going to throw a picture up here on the screen, and this picture was taken at f1.8. That's wide open, right? So the unique thing that f-stop does, you know, we're not going to talk about brightness and darkness because that can be changed with a lot of different camera settings. But the unique thing that f-stop does is that it gives you that bokeh effect, right? You might have heard photographers talking about it. That's kind of like that blurred background. So I shot this wide open, which means it is the camera's maximum wideness of its aperture, okay? And so that's why the model in the foreground here is very bright. I mean, not very bright, very sharp and in focus, and everything else in the background is very, very blurry. So the smaller the squint number, the more blurry the background is. If I had taken this at, you know, a larger squint number, then the background would be a little bit more in focus, right? Kind of similar to how the previous picture with the model on the traffic island, if I had taken that picture at a faster shutter speed, like let's say 1/500 or something like that, the cars would not be blurry, okay? So, but this picture, the picture with the model in the sunflower field, this picture, the reason why the background is very, very, you know, like a nice scenic looking blurriness, and she is sharp in focus in the foreground, is because of the fact that we used a very small f-stop number, if that makes sense. So if you have any questions, if any of this starts to get a little confusing or anything, please let me know in the comment section. I know the numbers get a little counterintuitive. Right? All right, so the last one we're going to talk about is ISO. So ISO, again, it also affects how light or dark the picture is. So this ISO setting, I can come here and I can set larger or smaller ISO settings, right? Let me see. Let me go to 12,800. So whenever I change the ISO settings, you see that the ISO 12,800, that could affect the lightness or the darkness of the picture. So you can see the exposure meter here, right? The exposure meter here is really high over to the positive numbers. Now I'm gonna go to a very like a lower ISO. Let's just do 100. Boom, you see that? It jumped all the way to negative, right? Let me go in the middle, somewhere in the middle, so you guys can see how 1600, yeah, you see that it changed to not so negative of a number. Let me go to another one, another setting, try to get it towards like 0. Closer to 0. Oop, not too far. But you guys get the idea. Right, you see the exposure meter changing. So ISO is how to get the picture brighter or darker. That's what it does. That's how you change the settings. This is a Nikon camera. So if you have a Canon, your screen might look a little bit different, but these are the basics of it. Now, but the major thing that ISO does, the major thing that you have to keep in consideration is that you do not want to set the ISO too high if the environment is already, reasonably bright enough. Because if you set it too high, then you get a bunch of noise, right? And the noise is the picture that is just you know, you might not have known how to describe it before you started taking more interest in photography. But you ever see a picture kind of like this one up on the screen? It's a really nice picture. The thing is that there's a lot of just tiny little like microscopic colorful dots. You know what I'm saying? And that's basically, the camera's trying to be more sensitive to gather more light, but you're almost kind of overloading it because you picked a really big ISO number. And so the camera starts, you know, kind of going haywire, kind of starts frazzling a little bit. And it makes your picture just look, you know, off. It has all this extra noise, all of this extra stuff on there because it doesn't, you know, it's all this extra light that it doesn't really need to make the picture look nice. So this is a noisy picture I have up here on the screen. It was taken on a really bright day. It was taken at ISO 2000. I hope you guys can see that on the screen. And there's just some noise on there. You know, it just kind of looks like, some people might think that it's kind of like a filter, right? They actually have noise filters because some people kind of like the look, but it's a good idea to understand why that's happening to your pictures. So here's another picture, and this is taking a much more appropriate noise setting, just ISO 100 for a really bright day. And as you can see, there's no noise. It's nice and crisp and clear, and it just looks like a better picture. You know what I'm saying? So you've probably seen some old pictures taken with some old digital cameras and things like that, and it had a lot of noise in it. And this is probably why the ISO was probably set a little bit too high, right? All right, so that's basically it. The major thing that ISO controls is how much noise is in your picture. The major thing to keep in mind is that you don't want the ISO setting to be too high, right? Now, if you're shooting in like a dark room or a party, or you're doing some club photography, or you're doing some flash photography in a dark room, some artistic type stuff, the major thing that you want to keep in mind is that you might want to have a higher ISO. You know what I'm saying? So I'm going to throw up a picture on the screen here. This is shot in like a dark room. There isn't a lot of light in the dark room, so you know, your camera needs to be a little bit more sensitive, so you might want to dial up the ISO sensitivity. But yeah, that's basically it. Like I said before, like I always recommend Nikon cameras because they kind of have all the interface settings laid out here looking nice so you can understand exactly what's going on. They have exposure meters. I'm sure Canons, I've seen Canons that have them too, but I just like the way Nikon lays everything out. So these are the basics, these are the pillars of photography. If you can master these, like I said, you can learn how to use any digital camera, but that's basically what they are: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. So play with these, go out there, shoot, practice, see how they affect each other and things like that. I'm gonna make some more videos to kind of show you how like other camera settings can also affect how light or bright the picture is, and how these three can affect each other, and how you can change them to compensate for like you can change aperture to compensate for changes to shutter speed and ISO and vice versa, and you know, all those other things. So let me know if you have any questions in the comment section, and I will continue to make these videos to help you guys out with digital photography. All right, I hope that was enlightening for you. Get it? Enlightening photography joke? All right, so I hope that was enlightening for you. I hope you learned something, and I'm gonna continue to make more videos like this. Let me know if you have any suggestions, questions, comments, concerns down in the description box below. Check out my social media and all the information and stuff like that. Also in the description box, all my, my Instagram and things like that. So yeah, that's basically it. Please like this video. Leave me a comment below, like I said. Share this video with a friend who's like maybe a photographer, amateur photographer who wants to learn more about it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification whenever, so that you can get a notification. Hit the bell button so you can get a notification anytime I post a new video. I really appreciate everyone's support of this channel. Thanks a lot. Have a good one. Happy shooting.